Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Crime Beat.
I gave her name. I thought everything was fine.
A young girl disappears from a small town. Operator received a phone call from a payphone. Hears a girl screaming, and then the phone went silent. I want you to search every ditch, every pool, every barn.
People say don't feel guilty. It's not your fault. How can you not feel guilty?
People think that after a certain amount of time that you're healed. That's just simply not the case.
Crime reporter Nancy Hicks brings us the story of Kelly Cook, the backup babysitter.
Standard is what you think of when you think rural Alberta. It's a small farming town about an hour's drive east of Calgary, and it's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. So in 1981, when a teenage girl vanished, the community was quick to rally together.
You all know why we're here. On the 22nd of April, Kelly Cook was abducted from her home in Standard. She hasn't been seen or heard of since. There's every reason to believe that she may still be alive.
The young girl's disappearance was traced to something so simple, something most teenagers and their parents can relate to. She was last seen as she went off to a new job as a babysitter. Kelly Cook was a bright-eyed 15-year-old girl with aspirations of one day becoming a lawyer. She was known as an old soul, happy to hang out with adults and talk about social justice issues.
Oh, she was a good kid. She was very good at school, and she had plans for the future. She always was like that. Even when she was tiny, and she was 3 going on 9 always. She was very smart.
Early in the morning of Wednesday, April 22nd, 1981, Kelly was busy getting ready for school when the phone rang at the cookhouse. Kelly answered, but there was no one there. A few minutes later, it rang again. When Kelly picked up the second time, there was a man on the line. He said his name was Bill Christensen. He was looking for a babysitter that night from 8:30 until midnight.
When she asked, calls out to mom and asks if she can babysit him. And so then mom said, go to school and see if anybody knows who this person is. And just because of the last name, everybody just kind of made the assumption that he was somebody's uncle, somebody's cousin, somebody's, somebody in the area.
The kids Kelly checked with didn't really know Bill Christensen. They just knew the last name. Christensen was common in Standard. Even now, if you look up that last name, there's more than a dozen listed in the phone directory. So Kelly told her mom it would be fine, and her parents relented and said she could go. That night, as expected, Bill Christensen pulled up to the cookhouse.
My brother and I were just talking the other day about it, and he said, I remember. He said, I stood at the top of the stairs, and he said, I remember what she was wearing and everything that night. And he said, she called back to mom and said, see you later. And mom would have said, call me when you get there, and she walked out the door. So I was in the basement window, looking out, and saw her walk down the path and get into the car, and the car drove away.
Like in many households with teenagers, there was one single, very important rule in the Cook home. Kelly or her sister would go babysitting, the girls were expected to call and let their parents know they had arrived safely. Kelly's parents waited and waited for her call. It never came.
I would say within the hour, she started to worry, to wonder why the call hadn't come. And she started to phone local people who would have some idea if there was anybody new in the community. The lady who worked at the bank, the lady who worked at the store, the lady who worked at the post office. Like, she contacted all of them, hoping that they would say, oh, yes, you know, Bill Christensen, yeah, he moved here a month ago and he lives wherever. And of course, none of them could tell her that. And I know when I went to bed 10 or 10:30 that she was phoning around.
Just after midnight, around the time Kelly should have been back from babysitting, her parents called police.
It would probably have been about 12:30 when I got woke up and the RCMP were there.
Kelly's disappearance was completely out of character, so police didn't waste any time.
They went out, my dad went out with them in the police car, and, you know, they had their lights on in the ditches and stuff, looking. Immediately. Like, there was no 24-hour wait time or anything. It was that night.
The overnight search came up empty. Kelly's parents were desperate to find her.
The man we're looking for, the man who abducted Kelly Cook, he may very well live in this area. He may live on one of these farms. So you may be talking to him today. Please be careful.
Helicopters were brought in, volunteer search teams scoured farms, outbuildings, and anywhere Kelly could be.
And the next one, are they going to? Okay.
Every vehicle that drove to or from the area was searched. Every person questioned.
You travel this road frequently? No, not often.
The searches went on for days. Hundreds of volunteers, including complete strangers from neighboring towns, joined in the efforts to find Kelly.
The total search area has been broken up and assigned to different groups, and you folks have been given descriptions of Kelly Cook, her clothing, etc. I want you to search every ditch, every coulee, every barn, granary, culvert, or any other place that you can think of.
Days just kind of blurred together for that. But I know Mom went out, my aunt went out, my grandmother went out with my mom and my aunt, and they took us. Like, we were never left alone, my brother and I. They took us. And, like, you just realize the absolute despair that you must feel as a parent, that you are willing to take your, you know, older mom, like her mom, my grandma, my brother and I, out to abandoned buildings in hopes of finding something. Like, you must be so desperate, like you can't stay at home anymore and just sit and hope for a phone call to come.
The searches didn't stop as the days turned into weeks. Still, there was no sign of Kelly.
Coming up on Crime News, an eyewitness comes forward with a description of Kelly's abductor. A chilling phone call would be the first real break in the case, but would it lead investigators to Kelly? We now return to Nancy Hicks.
Come on, Sam.
Earl Peters was one of the original investigators assigned to Kelly's case. Peters is now retired, but nearly 40 years later, he still knows all the facts in this case. Peters became an RCMP officer in 1967, so by the time he was assigned to Kelly's case in 1981, he had 14 years' experience under his belt. Peters still has all of his notebooks from back then.
That's your original notebook for that.
This is number one in that particular investigation. This is my Bible.
Oh.
Okay, so this is, and no, you can't have it. No, you can't see it. But I will refer to it. We were getting so many tips. I can't even begin to remember how many from like clairvoyance. And I remember one that said, oh, she had this vision and Kelly was tied to a tree and animals were eating her. And of course that wasn't true. But again, you dare not investigate those things.
There wasn't a day that the police weren't at the house. There wasn't a day that the media wasn't at the house. Every day that it was reported, and Dad he'd kind of be at the helm of the interview. Mom would talk. Mom would be a part of it, but Dad, definitely was the leader of it. And at the end of every interview, he would talk to Kelly through the camera in hopes that, he'd say to her, we're looking. Don't give up. So every day there was that in the house.
Police report no new leads in the abduction of 15-year-old Kelly Cook from her home in Standard 6 weeks ago. An RCMP spokesman tells CFAC News the case has hit a dead end, and police are appealing to the public to gain further clues. Kelly Cook was abducted from her home April 22nd by a man posing as Bill Christensen, who picked her up to babysit.
The first real lead came to police from a phone operator. The operator saw Kelly's case in the news and immediately came forward to investigators.
That very same night, sometime between 10 and 10:30, an AGT, which is TELUS now, Alberta Government Telephones, TELUS operator in Calgary, received a phone call from a payphone in Hussar.
Hussar is about a 20-minute drive from Standard. That call was made the same night Kelly went missing, about an hour and a half after she left her parents' home with Bill Christensen.
She simply hears a girl screaming. It's loud enough that it caused her to remove her headset, and then the phone went silent.
A scream and a hang-up. It was the worst news the Cook family could have received, and they believed it was Kelly. The problem was the possible trail to where she could be ended with the hang-up. There was also one witness, the owner of a local gas station, who offered some insight into who Bill Christensen might be.
There was a fellow that approached the service station manager to use his phone. He said the payphone outside doesn't work, and he wanted to use the phone. So the service station manager, having been stung before, said yes, but he stood there and wanted to make sure it was a local call. So he saw there was a local call, and he heard conversation babysitting. So in all probability, we believe this is our perpetrator, this Bill Christensen.
That is the first really detailed physical description of the man believed to be Bill Christensen. Earl Peters still has his notes from the interview with the owner of the gas station.
So he said, to me, the man looked like a farmer. I don't remember him wearing a hat, but he was rude. Dark hair, possibly curly, no gray. Fair to dark complexion, fair tan, clean shaven, a man in his 40s. Approximately 5'9", 190, 195 pounds, well built. Sounded as if he knew the people, that's why I thought he was a farmer.
From that description, police were able to create a composite sketch of Christensen. That sketch became a key factor to how the the investigation unfolded. But even after it was released, the police manhunt for Christensen came up empty.
We investigated Bill Christensen's all across Canada, and I think that we investigated at least 35 of them. So Bill Christensen was just a name we believed that he used.
The man was a phantom. No one knew him. No one knew where he might live or why he may have taken Kelly.
After the break on Crime Beat, a major development in the case came from a group of teenagers who lived several hours away from Standard. A shocking discovery led investigators to intensify their search for Bill Christensen. We now return to Nancy Hixt.
Nearly 2 months after Kelly disappeared, her family was given the worst news possible.
My dad was at work, and the RCMP had actually gone to Dad's work and told him that they had found her, and that he needed to go home, obviously, and tell everyone, but that the news media did have the information as well, and that there was a risk that if we were listening to the radio, that's how we could have found out about it. And so one of Dad's co-workers and friend drove him home to tell us. And of course, he comes home in the middle of the day, and we knew. I knew so. Do you remember the conversation? Kind of, I guess. Takes you back. I remember the night she left. It was dark, so of course the outside light goes on. The outside light never got shut off. And so that afternoon when Dad came home and told us, Mom, I'm going to check the hotel.
Kelly's body was found June 28, 1981. Investigators said it was obvious someone had gone to a lot of work to make sure Kelly would never be found.
Every attempt was made to ensure that she wasn't found. It's just that the perpetrator, Bill Christensen, was somewhat ill-informed on what he had to do to dispose of the body.
She was found on the shore of Chin Lake, which is an irrigation reservoir south of Taber, a 2.5-hour drive south of Standard.
The body is fully clothed, bound with ropes, and weighted by 2 cement cinder blocks. Within 24 hours, dental charts will reveal it is the body of Kelly Cook, and has been in the water for a considerable length of time.
A young man out riding his motorcycle made the horrific discovery. Nearly 4 decades later, Jerry Nelson remembers it like it was yesterday.
Well, it was a normal Sunday afternoon, and a few of my friends that came to the farm, and we were going to go for a motorcycle ride around the lake. We got to this area, of course, a little bit of a sand inlet that we race around and come back out to a rock crop. So you slow down and you're looking for somewhere to go through the rock, and noticed a body.
He stopped and waited for his 4 friends to catch up to him. Jerry stayed about 10 feet away, but what he saw is forever burned into his memory.
she was face down and head towards the west, so we came upon her feet, not knowing that it was a female at that time, not being able to tell, what the gender was because the body was fully clothed and face down, bound by the ropes with the cinder blocks to her side. Ankles, hips, and shoulders. There were 3 ropes around her body. When we noticed the cinder blocks, it was oh my goodness, this is a little more serious than a drowning.
Jerry and his friends flagged down a boater and asked him to call police.
Unfortunately, within minutes, there were officers on scene.
Several days later, Jerry learned the young woman he found was Kelly Cook.
Well, every time I cross that bridge, I look at this point, and it's definable by the landscape, and every time I cross that bridge, I think about, finding Kelly that day. I truly believe that, she was gone before she went into the water because her hands were bound, her wrists were in a rope that went around her waist. And the first thing I'm going to do when I go in the water with ropes on is try to get free. And if she was conscious, she could have gotten free from that type of being bound, I would think. In my mind, I question, what was going through that person's thoughts. And of course, like I said before, we can only think. There's no way we can understand because anything that would turn out with this result, obviously that person thinks without clearness.
A funeral was held in Standard, and bells rang out in honor of Kelly. The church was filled to capacity. Local businesses closed for the day, and Kelly's entire class attended the funeral.
We didn't only have to grieve the loss, we had to grieve how she was lost. So there's no positive around her loss. It's all very sad. It's all very negative. It's all very wrong.
The case became a homicide investigation, and the hunt for a killer intensified.
The circumstances of this case indicate that the suspect did not act spontaneously or take advantage of a circumstance to commit this offense, but rather stalked his victim and carried out the offense according to some purported plan that he had. The use of the name Bill Christensen is thought to be an alias, and it's a very, very common name in the community of Standard. And the use of this name, again, would indicate to us premeditation.
I can remember as a child watching a TV news special about Kelly's case. Investigators pleaded with the public for help in solving the case. The program showed a reenactment of the crime, including the original call to Kelly from the gas station. Police went through the entire timeline of events and showed a map of possible routes the killer took.
Does the person that was responsible for this crime have some connections in Standard and in Chin Lakes?
Well, we don't have any answers at all. And there's only one person that does have them. Until that day that he's caught or whatever. This is all we'll ever know, which is nothing.
As it gets longer, there's less and less chance of solving it. No matter what is said or done right now, nothing will bring Kelly back. If through this program, we can prevent, the program can prevent this from happening to someone else. And last but not least is to catch this guy for his arrest and conviction.
Coming up, As police were running out of leads, they turned to cutting-edge techniques to get inside the mind of the killer. Another twist in the case. Police learned Kelly's killer had his eyes on another young girl. Here's Nancy Hixt.
With Kelly's killer still on the loose, the RCMP decided to try some new investigative avenues. Officers told me this was one of the first cases in Western Canada to be taken to the Behavioral Sciences Unit of the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. Earl Peters still has a copy of the profile the FBI created of Kelly's killer.
This is from Quantico. So, for example, marital status. He is currently unmarried. He has previously been married, probably more than once. Each of the previous marriages ended bitterly, with the offender exhibiting a great deal of animosity toward his spouse. It is probable that the offender frequently abused his spouse or spouses and came to the attention of law enforcement as a result of domestic disturbance complaints. Personally, I find it interesting, but I'm not prepared to put all my eggs in that basket. It's an educated guess.
Still, the profile provided a lot of information about who Bill Christensen might be, and police couldn't ignore it. In the meantime, that generic composite sketch of Bill Christensen that was released earlier created an investigational nightmare.
When the composite drawing was released, we were just flooded then with tips. So-and-so looks similar to the composite drawing. Probably from day one that the composite drawing was released, we were backlogged by 500 tips for the next 2 years or more.
Every tip had to be investigated for fear some key information would be missed or overlooked.
We probably would have been better off if we had not released the composite drawing, because unfortunately now, once we have all of these tips, we have to follow through on them. We can't just ignore them. So we plowed an awful lot of resources into following up on the tips, as opposed to concentrating more on the key investigation itself.
And would you say that the tips based on the composite kind of led nowhere?
Oh yes, absolutely. I would say it led nowhere. Yeah, by the time I left the investigation, by the time I left Calgary in 1990, we had already interviewed 2,200 suspects. The vast majority of them would be looked in with the composite drawing.
2,200 suspects by 1990. As new tips rolled in, that suspect list continued to grow. Unfortunately for police battling against time, some of the tips were completely made up.
Unfortunately, some people do use the police for vendetta. They're going to cause grief to ex-spouses or bad neighbors or whatever. Again, it's not, you can't just dismiss it though because you think that's what it is. Because it could be an estranged spouse, but it may still be a legitimate interruption.
Many tips came from people who genuinely wanted to help, knowing this could have been their child.
When you look at Kelly, you say, well, this could be anyone's daughter. She wasn't living a high-risk lifestyle. She had done everything that she reasonably could do, and yet she still fell victim to it. So I think an awful lot of people could see their own daughter being caught up in this.
Is there ever been anybody who you're like, oh, well, I think it could be this person? And like you have one person in your mind, or no?
You know what? No, there's not one, several. There's a number that are really very interesting.
By now, I'm sure you've figured out Kelly's case has never been solved. After nearly 40 years, the killer has never been caught. What most people don't know is Kelly Cook was not Bill Christensen's first choice. Kelly was the backup babysitter. His first pick was a 17-year-old girl that I'll call Stacy. For safety reasons, we aren't revealing her true identity. Stacy was well known as the top babysitter in the area.
No.
On April 18th, 1981, 4 days before he called Kelly, Bill Christensen called Stacy. He asked her to babysit for him and his wife that evening, but Stacy wasn't available and turned him down. Bill Christensen went on to ask for recommendations of other babysitters. Stacy passed along 2 names. One of those was Kelly Cook. The teenager didn't think much more of it until a few days later. On April 23rd, 1981, Stacy got up and went to school like any other day. But when she got there, an announcement was made over the school intercom. The principal told students Kelly Cook was missing.
I still remember sitting at my desk, and when it came on, I just froze, and I'm like, oh, I was so scared. And I don't even think I didn't know the impact at that time.
Stacy told the principal she had given Kelly's name to a man named Bill Christensen.
It was horrible.
Her first ever interview with a journalist was with me for a special Crime Beat podcast series about this case. So do you remember getting this phone call?
Oh yeah, I remember exactly where I was in the house that day. Of course, there's no cell phones, and I remember exactly grabbing the phone. And they asked me, hi, this is, and they said my full name. And I said yes, and he said, I'm Bill Christensen, I live in the area, I'm new to the area, and I need a babysitter. And I said, I'm busy. I was going out that evening, and he said, do you know anyone in the area that can babysit? I thought, okay, he's new to the town, and Christensen is a very popular name in Standard, so I said yes. I said Kelly Cook, and I figure skated together, and so I gave her name, and I thought everything was fine. And then when I went to school on Monday, there was an announcement over the intercom that does anyone know the whereabouts of Kelly Cook? I went to the office, and I said, yes, I do. I know, and I just had this horrible feeling with me that, oh no, what have I done?
From that moment on, Stacy blamed herself for Kelly's disappearance.
Yeah, it was just a life changer for me. If only you could take that phone call back. But then what if, there's all these what ifs. What if I would have said, no, I can't tonight, but how about next week? Then, like you said, have you thought that could have been you? Yeah, then what if it would have been me the week after?
Knowing she had been the original target of Bill Christensen, police kept an extra watch over Stacy, especially after Kelly's body was found.
And that's when I realized, this could have been me. That was the big turning point of, wow, that could have been me. And I know that people say, don't feel guilty, it's not your fault. Anyone would have done it. She probably would have been the same for me. But how can you not feel guilty about someone losing their life? Yeah.
To make matters worse, the killer was still out there, and no one really knew who this Bill Christensen was.
The trail to find Kelly's killer was growing cold. But the family refused to give up hope. That's after the break. After nearly 40 years, investigators update the case and reveal what it will take to solve the mysterious death of Kelly Cook. Here's Nancy Hixt.
Dozens of people have been interviewed by the RCMP, but no charges have ever been laid. There's a special room at the Calgary RCMP Major Crimes Building filled with files from the Cook investigation. There are boxes stacked on top of boxes right up to the ceiling. On those boxes are names of suspects, but none of them have ever been charged with the kidnapping and murder of Kelly Cook.
We interviewed suspects right across Canada. We went to quite a few of our maximum penitentiaries, interviewed people there that had been convicted of murder, could potentially be involved. There have been suspects that appeared more interesting than others, and we devoted a tremendous amount of resources to them, but ultimately eliminated them as well.
The question is, after all these years, what will it take to move this case forward and bring justice for Kelly?
This file is not concluded, should not be concluded. This file should only be concluded when the perpetrator is either caught or presumed dead.
Do you still have hope that it could be solved?
Absolutely. Until another 30 years passes and then in all probability he's dead, one would remain optimistic that it could be solved. And that, of course, is why I'm cautious about what I say, because we want to make sure we have the ability to successfully prosecute.
So what do you think it's going to take to solve this?
Maybe a deathbed confession. I have to kind of believe that after all these years that this person, known as Bill Christensen, who knows what his real name is, has probably never confided to anyone. So often we will get information from a spouse, a family member, etc., but we haven't got that. So I think this person has kept it to themselves. Now, is that because they've died? I don't know.
Earl Peters told me what police really need is the name of the killer, the correct name. In the meantime, RCMP officers are still investigating.
I now have 2 investigators who are assigned to Kelly's investigation, and currently they're working on some new tips that have come in over the last year since we did the podcast.
Staff Sergeant Jason Zazelak runs the Serious Crimes branch of the Alberta RCMP. He told me the podcast series led to several investigative avenues to explore.
I think it's possible that the person responsible is somewhere within the newer tips, and the investigators, as they work through these carefully, that's what we'll be seeking to find this person, and ultimately we would like to, if the person is still alive, be able to sit across the table from them in a proper interview and convince them that now is the time to tell the truth. Now is the time to explain whatever happened on that day, in those days. Now is the time to tell us, and whatever consequences come of that, it's time.
Zazelak said Kelly's case remains a priority, and there are some proactive strategies happening, including further DNA analysis.
The first step in that will be consultations with our forensic laboratory. These are all items that have been tested already. And so the danger that we run is that each time you test one of these exhibits or items, especially when you're looking for something like DNA, you're actually destroying a part of the exhibit in the examination process. So we don't have an unlimited number of tries, and we have to be very critical, very discerning about the resubmissions.
Before that retesting takes place, police plan to exhaust all tips. Every time the case is profiled on the news, RCMP investigators receive more tips and that pushes the case forward. Currently, police have approximately 40 persons of interest in this case. Investigators are hoping this show could lead to identifying a suspect.
So what we're looking for in tips, and especially at this stage, we want to hear from someone who the offender told, or we want to hear from the offender themselves. It's less useful for us for someone who has taken an interest in the case to be doing their own research, media, social media, and what they may be able to obtain otherwise to share theories about the case with us.
Over the years, Kelly's sister Marnie has been contacted by dozens of people claiming to know who's responsible.
You know, people think that after a certain amount of time that you're better, that you're healed, and your heart is better. And that's just simply not the case. Time helps, for sure, but the story seems to forever be evolving, and I think that's a little unsettling. It's unsettling to wonder if, I hope that I've never met him. I hope that I've never trusted him, that he's never come into my home.
And there's another stress weighing heavily on Marnie. While she wants justice for Kelly, she also struggles with worrying what horrific details she would learn if the killer is caught.
I'm still conflicted. Part of me for sure does not think it's fair that this individual is living, could be living a fabulous life. Could be doing this to other people, other families. So that's what's wanting. And then there's the part of me that I'm not really sure you want all the answers. And I don't think they're good. I don't think the answers are good answers. How could they be? Right? The ultimate result wasn't good.
Kelly's family has done the math. They know time is running out for the killer to be caught and brought to justice. The original investigators of this case felt Bill Christensen was between 30 and 45 years old back in 1981. If that estimate is accurate, the killer would now be around 70 to 85 years old.
Well, my dad wanted justice on earth and, wanted him to pay and wanted people to see that he paid. Whereas I believe that even with that justice, the ultimate justice, he'll get somewhere else. That's what I believe. I also think a part of it is you go back 38 years, and I know for myself, a lot of my memories are almost like snapshots of what I listened to or what I've made myself remember. The memories aren't clear anymore. So, even to remember her as a person, I don't have that memory anymore. I have like a picture. I have a snapshot of what I think I know what she looked like because I have a photo of it. But to actually know how she looked or how she walked, or those memories are gone because it's been so long.
Nearly 4 decades after their nightmare began, Kelly's family can only hope someone will finally come forward with the tip needed to catch her killer.
The initial airing of this Crime Beat TV documentary and podcast series has resulted in at least 40 new tips from the public. Currently, 5 of those are considered substantial new leads that the RCMP are now investigating. I'm Anthony Roy.